Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Nintendo 64 playthrough. Firstly, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone that's tuned in so far, everyone that's left me feedback, likes, anything like that at all on these videos so far. And for anyone who may just be tuning in for the first time, welcome to the channel. And for everybody who has been coming here and watching these videos for the last load of weeks, welcome back. I hope you've all had a brilliant weekend and a brilliant Sunday so far. So without further ado, let's get cracked on here. So what we're going to be doing in this segment is we're going to be going through the Spirit Temple. We're going to be going through it as a child firstly, and then of course coming back as an adult. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm just going to drop the Master Sword, of course, and then get over to the Desert Colossus. So what happened then in my last segment was that I got into Gerudo Fortress, completed that, albeit I did get locked up once or twice, but that's okay. Didn't really have much of an impact on the overall time of the playthrough anyway. And then of course I went and tried my hand at the archery challenge in Gerudo Fortress. That didn't go so well. I did do it the first time, but then I tried it again twice after that, just to try and get the biggest quiver. That didn't work out too well, and I thought, you know what, I can't be annoyed with this, so I'm just going to move on. So that's exactly what I done. And then of course traversed over the Desert Colossus. Luckily enough that went smooth and it was completed first time with no issues. So now here we are at the Spirit Temple, and what an introduction. Two pots just come flying across at you. And here we have Nabooru, who of course then turns out to be one of the sages a little bit later on. Nabooru herself at this moment in time, so bear in mind of course that we are Child Link, so we have went back 7 years. At this point in time, Nabooru is the second in command of the Gerudos, and she's here because she doesn't really like Ganondorf that much, so she wants to try and get rid of him essentially. But the theme of the game, not the theme of the game, sorry, but in my last commentated playthrough, last commentated segment, whatever, I spoke about, the mood of the game, what the music tries to do as well, the way the music communicates with you, the message that it tries to send. I spoke about the Forest Temple, which of course is probably my second favourite temple in the game. And the theme music of the Forest Temple, and what it tries to do, what it tries to communicate with you. So I always compare Ocarina of Time and the transition that you do between child and adult Link, of course, to the transition of your own life when you transition from a child into an adult. Of course, in real life, we can't go each way every other day, really. If only. So, essentially here, now that we've reached the Spirit Temple, and chronologically, canonically, it's the last temple of the game. And that actually contradicts what I grew up knowing, because I always thought that the Shadow Temple was the last temple of the game. I know. But essentially, when we look at the game the whole way through, and the soundtrack, which of course is very deliberate, I feel. But essentially the music and what it does and what it communicates is that at the very start of the game, of course, you have the soundtrack of the Kokiri Forest. It's all it's new, it's exciting, but it's safe. And then of course, as we progress through the game, soundtrack is much different. And the message that it communicates to you, of course, varies greatly over the course of the game. In my personal opinion though, what I feel happens is that as we progress through the game, and of course as we go from child to adult and vice versa, the level of challenges and complexity that we face, it grows. It only ever increases, really. And just to, I guess, just to back that up, really, again, this is all really in my opinion. I don't claim to be some sort of expert in video game lore or even music, really. Although I did do music in secondary school, I only lasted a couple of weeks though because my family wanted me to do ICT instead, which I did do, albeit a little bit devastating at the time. I guess it worked out for the best though. But anyway, so what we have here is, of course, the list of soundtracks from the game, really. And we start off with the Minuet of Forest, which of course is, I guess, a slow and steady ballroom dance musical arrangement. Again, you know, I did do a little bit of research on this beforehand. Not much, but just enough so that I could, of course, talk through the segment of the video game here, the segment of the playthrough. And essentially the Minuet of Forest, even when you play that particular theme in this game, it's very light beat. It's very light and upbeat. Again, when you hear that, it would give you a sense of safety and comfort, positivity, and of course the upbeatness that comes along with it. And then of course you go into the Bolero of Fire, which, when played, teleports you to the entrance of the Fire Temple. And then of course after that it's the Serenade of Water, which of course we all know what a serenade is. It's a song or a piece of music that's normally played by a person to show some sort of romantic interest. And then of course after that we have the Nocturne of Shadow. Nocturne, of course, you know, comes from nighttime. I think nocturne's a Latin word maybe. But when you hear nocturne, nocturnally, and you know, things like that, normally it makes you think of nighttime anyway. And when you hear the Nocturne of Shadow, oh, that was actually a close one there. Gonna have to be a little bit careful from now on, and my shield is gone. Fantastic. When it comes to the Nocturne of Shadow, again, this particular piece of music evokes feelings of nighttime. And that's essentially what it does, because when you hear the Nocturne of Shadow being played, that's exactly how you would feel. And then of course moving on to the Requiem of Spirit. Well, we all know a Requiem, like a Requiem Mass, for example. I myself grew up in the Catholic faith here in Ireland. Not that I practice Catholicism anymore, to be fair. Maybe, you know, that'll be a different discussion for a separate video sometime. but I don't practice that particular religion anymore. But essentially a Requiem, like a Requiem Mass, is normally played in remembrance of the dead. And then of course we have the Prelude of Light, or Prelude as it may be known as well. And we all know what a prelude is. A prelude is like a prelude to disaster or whatever. It's an introduction to something else. But when we look at these particular pieces of music, okay, this is obviously a smooth one for me here. I think I'm on the wrong side of this fence. But we'll get the small key and we will move on. Yeah. Okay, let's go up and grab this silver rupee here. I don't know what I'm playing at, trying to throw this boomerang through the fence. But these bats are getting awfully close and friendly here. So, moving on. When we look at the particular pieces of music that are used in this game, especially when it comes to the temples themselves or the Ocarina songs that are played to grant us access to the temples. Okay, darn, this is getting a bit embarrassing. Let's move on here. But when you think about the names, a prelude, an introduction, a minuet, of course, Minuet of Forest, it's got an upbeat tempo, slow, steady. And then of course we go to the Bolero and the Serenade, Nocturne, and then of course Requiem. I personally feel, and again, I say this with absolutely no musical expertise whatsoever, so I could be completely wrong here. Let's not do that ever again though, because if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that when you take a fall off one of the ledges here in these temples, it's never normally a good thing, so let's just get this as quickly as possible and get out of here. But anyway, when it comes to, especially the order in which these temple teleporting songs are played, it builds up to something. There's a pattern here. Everything starts off in a certain tempo, a certain beat. It evokes certain feelings within you. You've got a prelude, you've got a minuet, you've got a bolero. So I guess it's the level of intensity starts to increase. And then of course, when it gets to the Requiem of Spirit, there's just, for me personally, it feels like there's a sense of finality when this particular piece of music is played. And the reason why I say that is because, well, at this point, this is supposed to be this is the final temple of the game, before you then go to the Temple of Time, and then of course Ganon's Castle and everything else. So naturally, there will be a sense of finality when it comes to this temple here. But one thing I also noticed was that when it comes to the music that's actually played within the temples as well, as far as I know, the music that is played within the temples doesn't have any sort of special name like a Requiem or a Nocturne, for example. It's just, say, Fire Temple OST or whatever. But I guess the feelings that you get when you go through these particular temples. Well, firstly, Minuet of Forest. When you play the Minuet of Forest, it's like two people who are sort of facing each other, doing the same dance. They're together almost. But that could also mirror the relationship between Link and Saria. And then of course, whenever you go into the temple itself, that completely changes. So I guess when you hear the Minuet of Forest versus the Forest Temple soundtrack itself, it's different. Because number one, the Minuet sets you up for this idea that things are still going to be, I guess, a bit light and breezy and straightforward. And then of course you gain access to the temple and you realise that it's anything but that. Don't get me wrong, the Forest Temple itself, I think that it's a linear enough temple. It does have minimal backtracking, and of course everything sort of revolves around this centre room when eventually you go through the four ghosts. You've beaten the three, and then the last one is in the central room. But the Forest Temple itself, especially when you think about the way the corridor is all twisted, you're having to solve certain puzzles that you haven't quite solved before. It's not as straightforward as certainly the dungeons when you are Child Link. And the Forest Temple itself, with the level design of course and the music, for me, it definitely instills feelings of, I guess, mystery, uncertainty for sure, and it can be a bit unsettling because of course when you go to the Forest Temple, I do believe that is the first time you're introduced to the, I'm going to get the name wrong again, but you know those hands, the Wall Masters I think they're called, but that's the first time you get introduced to them as well. And if you've progressed through a temple with, and you've gotten quite far there, if one of those things grabs you, you're right back to the entrance of the temple, and that can be, especially if you're on a first time playthrough, that can be quite daunting to recover from. I certainly remember when I was, on a previous playthrough, I got to the Forest Temple and I failed twice. So I was trying to go and get the Megaton Hammer and I failed. And then I went back up, I got there again, and what happened? I failed again. And when that happened, I didn't play the game for a long time because I just thought, I can't be annoyed with this anymore. So I moved on. And then I came back, of course, because I absolutely love this particular game. Full confession though, I've never actually played Majora's Mask, so I think I'm going to give that a go too. Anyway, but that's essentially the way I would feel when it comes to the Forest Temple and the music that's associated with the Forest Temple, and I guess the message that this game tries to communicate up until this point with the level design and the music as well. But now that we're in the Spirit Temple here, it's a little bit more complex. Don't get me wrong, the Spirit Temple is, when you first come through this place, it's as confusing as anything else in the game really. But what we'll do here is we'll come here first as Child Link, we'll meet Naburu, of course then we'll go through, as she calls it, the tiny hole. And then of course as we'll go through there, we progress through, you know, this particular part of the temple that, let's be honest, I think that there's maybe 2 holes in this part of the temple that you crawl through as a child, but it's all pretty explorable as an adult really, and I just missed that jump. That's, yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to make an absolute dog's dinner out of this particular room here. So apologies in advance if that happens. But essentially, you come here as a child anyway. Your main objective as a child is to get the silver gauntlets. Of course then you meet Naburu, who goes on to become one of the sages, but you also get introduced to some new enemies within the game. And again, for first time players, this can be quite daunting here. So what we'll do here is we're just going to move this block with the sun on it to the spot where the sunlight comes in. I personally think that, and I hope this person never ever comes across this video, but if anyone ever remembers Alex Mahone from Prison Break Season 2, played by William Fichtner, I personally think that when the suns get lit up here on these stones or whatever else, they kind of look like him. Please don't come after me. But anyway, so we'll do this and we'll go ahead and we'll collect the rest of the rupees here, and we'll get ourselves out of this room pretty quickly. Spirit Temple was another one of those temples that I loved coming here, on all of my previous playthroughs except for maybe one a very long time ago, because I got confused. I got very disorientated by, I guess, what I would call the central room of the Spirit Temple, the room that has, of course, the massive statue in the middle, which of course is quite important when it comes to the playthrough itself. It's quite integral, whatever, but it's pretty central to essentially what we're trying to do here as well. Clearly I've forgotten my dictionary or thesaurus this morning, but we'll crack on here anyway. Definitely not my favourite puzzle, the whole Deku stick and torches and everything else, especially when you have a little bit more of a distance to go through. Because when it comes to certain types of puzzles humbling you in this game, this is definitely one of them for me. So look, we've got Din's Fire already equipped. Let's just crack on with that, sure, and get out of here sharpish. So yeah, Spirit Temple so far, that's what's happening. Now, going back to what I was saying before about the music as well, we've already discussed the Forest Temple, of course, and the feelings that it invokes when you hear the music and you see the level design as well. When you go to the Fire Temple, it's a little bit different. So a bolero is a piece of music that it originated from Spain, where I live now, but it originated from Spain, and it can be characterized by sharp turns and stomping your feet. Stomping, whatever. So the tone has shifted a little bit. We've now went from the introduction, I guess, with the prelude, and then of course the minuet, and it's all steady and upbeat and I guess a little bit slow. We're now going into a full-blown bolero here, which is going to be, I guess, a lot more, you can say aggressive for sure, maybe a bit louder, a bit more passionate perhaps. And then of course we go into the music of the temple itself. So anyone who knows a little bit about Zelda in general will know that there were two versions of the Fire Temple music that were composed for the game. One of them is still present in the earlier version of the game. I think I actually still have the cartridge from that myself. But essentially, that version was removed from later releases of the game because it resembled religious chanting, and of course Nintendo, being the family-friendly company that they are, they cannot have that in their games. So that was then removed and then replaced, of course, later with just a different version. Most of it is still the same, it's just I think nearly all of the vocals have been removed from the revised version. But essentially then, when it comes to the soundtrack that's in the Fire Temple itself, it's... well, when you go to the Fire Temple, you... and again, this comes back to discussions around what the transition is like from child to adult, and if you even compare that with real life as well. So the Fire Temple, of course, is chronologically the second temple in the game that you'll go to and collect a medallion for. And again, when... oh, speaking of transitions from child to adult here, this is of course the owl. And he's just talking about how time has passed and everything else as well. And I guess it's fitting that we run into him here. And he just essentially says that, you know, everything is up to you. Maybe it's not my time anymore. So I think he's sort of realizing that, you know, time of course is passing for him. And I guess if we travel 7 years into the future, of course, with the Master Sword, he no longer exists. So perhaps, you know, this owl is quite old and doesn't have long left himself, and that's why he gives us what he calls his last bit of advice. And what we'll do now is we'll get the silver gauntlets here, and then we are treated to, I guess, a bit of a cutscene within the game. But now that we have the silver gauntlets, it means that we can interact with larger blocks. Okay, so as we can see, there is some dialogue here. Thing is, I think what I remember is that if you... this all depends on the time of day in the game itself, but as we can see, Nibiru here has been trapped by the two witches, the two twin sisters, who go to be known as Twin Rova. But if it was daytime when you went into the temple, this then occurs during the day. And then of course, at nighttime, if you go into the temple at nighttime, it occurs at nighttime as well. But I think it's definitely a bit more fitting that it happens during the night. But now that we've collected the silver gauntlets, and as you can see, the first part of the Spirit Temple is quite straightforward and linear. Very, very minimal backtracking again. And this will now see us through. We'll warp to the Temple of Time. We'll grab the Master Sword and be on our merry way back here. So yeah, we'll give this just another couple more seconds, and what we will do is we will stop the audio and then start a new audio for the second half of the Spirit Temple. Thanks everybody for tuning in to this one, and I'll see you on the next video.